Yeah, I mean, to my mind, the problem with these celebrity speakers being paid crazy amounts of money to come in and then we have to pay for all the security is most of them are not intellectuals. So why are we spending university money on non-intellectuals? I think the most basic question should not be, can we tolerate this point of view? Is there any academic content here? Is there anything that looks like research-based thinking, any kind of innovative thinking here that is something like what we would expect at a university level, something that will educate an undergraduate to a higher level? Or are we just bringing in somebody to shout slogans so everybody can tweet it and argue about it? So that, to my mind, is where the waste of money comes in.
Well, let me introduce you, and then we're just going to start chatting. This is Stephen Messenger, a very prolific blogger, as well as a writer for Quillette Magazine and Arrow.
It's spelled A-R-E-O. I don't know if I would call myself a writer. I mean, I've submitted essays and they accepted them, but I'm not on any sort of regular, rotation or anything like that.
I don't want to piggyback or coattail on the Heterodox Academy, but it seems like you are involved in the people who are speaking across difference, who are really interested in the direction that our political discourse is going, and perhaps trying to inject more rationality into the debate. Is that fair to say?
I am interested in it, and I think a lot about it, and I write a lot about it, and I attended the conference. But I think that's about where it ends. It's just my interest, my hobby, my passion, I guess, to think and about this stuff. But I'm not a member. I'm not part of any of the panels of discussions. I don't contribute other than my own opinions, tweets, blogs, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So you attended the Heterodox Academy, and afterwards, I saw you writing kind of a mild push or criticism of the conference, how it seemed not as heterodox as you wished it to be or hoped it to be.
Right. Okay. So to answer that question, it kind of goes to my thesis, my theory, worldview, whatever you want to call it. And that is, first of all, I want to say right off the bat that I'm a huge fan of Heterodox Academy. I support them. They're good people. They're trying their best to do the right things, and it's my favorite group out of all the groups that exist out there who are trying to bridge the divide. And I support all that they're doing. But from my perspective, from where I sit, they're still not completely getting it in terms of what I think is the problem with university culture as a whole, all those things.
And what would be getting it?
Understanding conservatives. One way to describe what I see the difference between liberalism and conservatism, it all boils down to faith in something as the source of truth, as moral truth. So here's one example. One of my essays on my blog, I argue that words like liberty, equality, justice, and fairness mean different things depending on whether you're on the left or on the right. The left tends to favor positive justice, outcome-based positive justice, positive liberty. The right tends to favor process-based negative liberty. Or
potential liberty? Is that what you mean by negative?
No, I mean freedom from. Negative liberty is freedom from. Positive liberty is freedom to.
Okay.
And there's a big difference between those things. And so what happens is everyone agrees liberty is a good thing. And so then we start writing policies about how we're going to achieve liberty, and they seem antithetical to each other. Sometimes the policies that the right uses or would want to use or would propose to advance liberty seem like not liberty to the left. and vice versa, because they have different conceptions. It's almost like we're speaking two different languages and we don't know it because the two languages use the same words.
Yeah. This is confusing to me. If the right desires freedom from, how does that mesh with the right's adulation of tradition? So they don't want to be free from tradition, whereas the left kind of does want to be free from tradition.
Right. So it's not so much tradition, it's the collected wisdom that comes from the tradition. So this goes back to my struggling with trying to describe the difference between my frustration with Heterodox Academy and what they're not getting, what liberals in general are not getting. I'm trying to write an essay and get my thoughts together about what it is that bothered me. By the end of the day, I just felt like, I just felt bothered. I just felt like, this really didn't get to where I was hoping it would get to. And trying to put my finger on what it is that bothered me about it. And what I've identified, I don't know if I can pull it up real quick. I saw 4 biases in operation at this conference. Mm-hmm. One, anti-conservative.
So not just a conservative or not conservative, but anti.
Right. Another one is pro what I call rationalism. It's you show me the study, sort of academic
citations.
Show me the research, some of the citations.
People are like peppering the ground with footnotes.
Right, that kind of thing. It's that kind of thing. That's a pretty good way to say it. Academic bias. So we have anti-conservative, we have pro-rationalist, we have pro-academic, and we have pro-intellectual. So one of the comments that stuck with me like nothing else was a conversation about right-leaning groups on campuses inviting trolls and provocateurs to come speak, right? And so that's a whole discussion by itself. But the comment about these perceived trolls and provocateurs was, they're not even intellectuals. To big laughter and approval by the audience. And I just gone, oh God, the elitism of this. And I just can't, I'm like, this is why Trump won. I mean, you're just not in tune with what's going on out there. And so these 4 biases all do kind of layer on each other and sort of create this perfect storm of what Heterodox Academy is trying to fix.
Yeah.
And they're not. And so one of my frustrations is that they're not doing a deep dive into what it is that's really going on. And I don't see them doing that digging. I see that, viewpoint diversity is the hammer and every problem is a nail.
Yeah.
I know you want to ask a question, but let me kind of continue this a little bit to try to better describe what I mean with my cognitive style and my getting into psychology. One of the assertions I make in my Colette essay, I think it is that I don't think that Plato or Aristotle or Burke or Rousseau or Marx or any thinker who we think of as one of the pivotal thinkers of human history invented a new way of thinking. I think what they did was articulate the way of thinking with which they were born. Okay, so the cognitive style idea in me, like I said, is like operating systems like Mac and PC, and for example, if we could take Rousseau, right, from the French Revolution, and put him in the DeLorean and drop him in Evergreen College.
Wait, Rousseau was before the French Revolution. Where you mean Robespierre?
During Robespierre, he was during the French Revolution. He was one of the key
the thinkers of, yeah.
But if we could take that brain and put it in Marty McFly's DeLorean and drop it in Evergreen or College or any of the elite universities in the U.S., he would be a social justice warrior. He would be on that crowd. He would possibly be one of the Antifa activists, right? So I think cognitive style psychology comes first, and all of this reasoning follows. And the basic contest between left and right is not over size of government. It's not over abortion. It's not over how we handle guns or school safety or any of that. It's over the different processors. It's the different ways we even conceive of what it is we're doing. And I think Heterodox Academy, a room full of academics, many PhDs, many of those in social science, haven't gone deep enough into social science to really understand what it is that's going on. They've decided that the lack of viewpoint diversity is the problem, and therefore more of it will fix the problem. And my point is, you've missed the boat.
Well, it might just be a rallying point. It might just be like that which leads to more.
Right. So that's right. I think so. What I'm describing here is the feeling I get, the sense I get by the end of the day. Now, I'm not saying that every person there is guilty of this, of what I'm accusing them of doing. I'm not saying, I suspect that of all people there, John Haidt totally gets what I'm saying, right? I think he might get it, maybe even better than I do, right? Probably better than I do, because he spent an entire career studying psychology, and who am I? I'm just a guy who reads on his spare time and thinks and talks about this stuff, right? So he might get it more than I do. And you're right, it could be a strategy. It could be a foot in the door to get to the bigger things. But that doesn't satisfy my frustration. That doesn't, I still don't see the real evidence of them listening and deeply understanding the true nature of what this political divide is all about. And I'm wishing that they would do more of that.
Yeah. A lot of these things that I see happening on the left and the right in any given group it's not hypocrisy, but the person's strength is also their greatest weakness. And with regards to the left, generally, it seems like they want to tell the right that they're going around alienating this group and that group and this group and that group, and all. They're constantly accusing the right of alienating all these little groups. And in the process, they're alienating more and more and more and more, not only of the right, but of their own. So I wonder if one of the key questions that all of us should ask as thinkers and as people who do want to reach across the divide, whatever that divide is to ask first, or to try to imagine, who might I be alienating? Who might the Heterodox Academy be alienating? And shouldn't that be the ones that they should be trying to understand or inviting, not even trying to understand, but inviting in? Would that be going too far?
I'm of two minds about that. First of all, it's interesting. I met just by random one other guy at this conference yesterday. In the morning when we first got there, they had coffee and donuts and stuff, and they had a little table standing, and I just happened to stand at a table with this other guy, and we ended up talking. We ended up sitting together for a lot of the day and having a lot of conversations about what we were seeing. And he had a very similar take. Be careful the way you say things. Try to have the other person in mind when you're talking to them and how they might react to what you say, so that you don't trigger them into not listening. Like if I say you're an idiot, you're probably not going to listen to whatever I say after that, right? So I get that. That's a valid point. On the other hand, you're talking about walking on eggshells. You're talking about exactly the sort of snowflake mentality that's behind a lot of this. Of now we're trying to trump each other into who's got the best "I'm more alienated" card.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And so that's why I say I'm of two minds of that.
Well, I said that in part because you said earlier on, this is why Trump won. Like you had one of those moments. And I wonder, like, if it's possible for any group to understand when a big laugh happens, that laugh, there's a lot going on in that laugh, whenever a big laugh happens.
I think it's possible. And I think if it's possible anywhere, it's possible in Heterodox Academy. I think these people really, really want to understand. And they almost thirst for a deep grasp of what's going on. And I think you're right. When something like that happens, maybe they should say, oh, that could be one of those things.
Is it possible for you, or can you at least try to make the attempt for me and my audience to try to explain what this group does not get about conservatives? What is it that they don't get that led to Trump winning? What is that?
I think it's the sacred value. The sacred value of social capital.
Okay, we need to unpack that. Can you define social capital? You brought up the flag earlier.
I brought up the flag earlier, right. There's the flag.
So it's a symbol that isn't important in and of itself, but it's important because it ties a group together.
Well, yeah. It's kind of the glue that holds society together. It's sort of that intangible thing that makes a people, that makes a society a society. It's that understanding that we are part of a bigger thing. If I had a minute, I could find the page in The Righteous Mind where he talks about that. He talks about social capital is the left's blind spot. That's the name of the section of the book, the left's blind spot. And the left's blind spot is social capital. So the left, with its tendency to think in terms of, weird rationalism and rule-based, method-based logic, so to speak, when they see conservatives or people in general objecting to NFL players kneeling, for example, they want to see what's the reasoning, what's the rationale, and it's hard to put your finger on that. It's hard to say. If everyone understood this concept of social capital, then I could say it's social capital. That's what I think the kneelers are violating.
One of the patterns that I've seen with regards to the illiberal academic is that, or the academy and its illiberalism, or its mockery and outright malice toward the blue-collar worker, is that a lot of people in academia have only ever been in academia. They went from high school right into college, and then to their graduate study, and then their postdoc, so they've been insulated the whole time. And there's two parts to that. One, they've been self-selected. Only the people who can get with this program can get to the top of the program, and then can go on to support this program. But two, their ideas never have to actually make it in the real world. Nobody's run a business. Nobody has to worry about the market. They can sit all day and criticize and deconstruct reality as it's happening and sit in the ivory tower trope, right?
Right.
But that causes a disconnect. One, because they're surrounded by people who are in their bubble, and two, because they've never actually had to please an audience outside of the people who want to go through the hoops that they've already gone through.
I think there's truth in that, but I'm reluctant to just broad brush everybody that way.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are many top of the pyramid academics who came from much humbler roots, blue-collar roots. And so I wouldn't be so quick to just say they've never right? Had to. But I think there is also truth in what you're saying. So Nassim Nicholas Taleb, I think his new book is called Skin in the Game. And he's getting to what you're getting at there. The academics, there's no cost for being wrong, right? And so, whereas out here in the blue-collar world, yeah, there's a big cost for being wrong. John Haidt and others talk about this thing called wicked problems, right? Things that are not black and white, easy to solve, like, an engineering problem or something where it's, strength and mass and weight, and you do the math and you figure it out. Wicked problems, social problems, things that are hard to understand and hard to get a handle on. When a company has a wicked problem, when things are going wrong and they don't even know what they don't know, they can't figure out why it's going wrong, they bring in outside help. Sometimes they hire consulting firms, and some of those help and some of them don't. But the point is they bring in new ideas from outside. What is it that we're not seeing? Maybe there's a way of thinking that we haven't used, or a way of interpreting what we're seeing that we haven't done, so that they bring in outside help. Heterodox Academy could do that. Bring in outside help, bring in outside ideas, bring in thoughtful conservatives and ask them, have all day conference of what we can even say, conservative intellectuals. Let's even say that, even though I'm saying intellectual, pro-intellectual bias. Let's just say bring in conservative intellectuals and have them describe to Heterodox Academy what they perceive conservatism is, what conservatives think conservatism is, and what conservatives think is wrong with the Academy. This is from The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Social capital refers to a kind of capital that economists had largely overlooked. The social ties among individuals and the norms of reciprocity and trustworthiness that arise from those ties. When everything else is equal, a firm, he's talking about companies, with more social capital will outcompete its less cohesive and less internally trusting competitors. Which makes sense given that the human beings were shaped by multi-level selection to be contingent cooperators. In fact, discussions of social capital sometimes use the example of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish diamond merchants. This tightly knit ethnic group has been able to create the most efficient market because their transaction and monitoring costs are so low, there's less overhead in every deal, and their costs are so low because they trust each other. If a rival market were to open up across town composed of ethnically and religiously diverse merchants, they'd have to spend a lot more money on lawyers and security guards and also so on. Everybody loves social capital, whether you're left, right, or center. So it's not tradition per se.
And it's not orthodoxy either.
Right. No, it's not orthodoxy. So this is interesting. It's interesting you bring that up because this section of the book is a story that Haidt tells where he decided to learn about conservatism. He decided to do for himself what I'm recommending the Heterodox Academy does, because he was going to teach a course in it. And so he was in a bookstore in New York City, and he found a book with the title is called Conservatism. I have it right here somewhere. But anyway, what the author was saying is what makes social and political arguments conservative as opposed to orthodox is that the critique of liberal or progressive arguments takes place on the enlightened grounds of the search for human happiness based on the use of reason. As a lifelong liberal, I had assumed that conservatism equals orthodoxy equals religion equals faith equals rejection of science. It followed, therefore, as an atheist and a scientist, I was obligated to be a liberal. But Mueller, the author, asserted that modern conservatism is really about creating the best possible society, the one that brings about the greatest happiness given local circumstances. This is Haidt. Could it be? Was there a kind of conservatism that could compete against liberalism in the court of social science? Might conservatives have a better formula for how to create a healthy, happy society? Then he goes on, he kept reading, and then that leads into the topic about social capital. And so
he really does praise conservatives quite a bit in that book.
He does. He does. And this is why I said earlier that of all people, I think he probably gets it. He maybe understands it better than I do. And the strategy of promoting viewpoint diversity is a foot in the door that the people who most need to have their viewpoints expanded will accept. He's basically doing a jujitsu here of using liberal values of inclusiveness and tolerance and open-mindedness to get in the door to then say, you're not very inclusive or tolerant or open-minded. But we're still in the early stages of it. Even though Heterodox Academy formed in 2015 and Haidt's been doing this, studying this for most of his career, we're still in the early stages of it. But that's why I say I think he gets it probably better than anybody, and maybe even better than I do. And it's an approach.
And this is why I wanted to speak with you, and why I want your opinion out there, because insofar as it is in the early stages, this is the time when a push in the right direction will have a really good effect, or at least they'll be open to being considerate to different pushes from different directions.
You just made my day by saying that, because you hear me. Even if you don't agree, even if you think I'm full of it, even if you hear it. And I think that's the biggest problem. I think academia, Heterodox Academy, doesn't hear yet. In the sense that you just showed me, you hear me. And that's where I'm pushing them. I mean, I'm not an intellectual. My kids don't know my SAT score, and if I have anything to say about it, they never will, because it's an embarrassment compared to what theirs were. Right? My degree is mechanical engineering. I struggled through, and I made it. In my family, I'm the intellectual. My dad was a welder. My mom was a telephone operator. Right? I'm the intellectual in the family, but I was probably one of the dullest tools in the shed of that open mind conference.
But that gives you particular insight.
Okay, yes, but let's not go down that intersectionality path of saying that my truth is real truth and you don't get it because you're not me.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my insights. I have my way of looking at it. I'm just one data point. I would like to see them get many more data points.
Okay. Yeah.
Put all of them together and get a big picture.
Yeah.
Right? That might give them, which might make the solutions they're trying to implement more effective. Yeah. The overall feeling I had by the end of the day, after I left there, was I just sat through a day full of, aren't we great? Don't we just get it? And aren't we smart? And aren't we intellectual? And don't we just know what the right things are and what should be done? Now, I'll admit that's unfair to most of the people there. Like I just said, I think everybody is trying to do the right thing. And but still, I had that feeling by the end of the day. That's real too. So one of the things, if I could say that meeting was missing, if I could put it into one word, it would be humility. I think that's what academia is missing. I think that's what Heterodox Academy is missing. They're doing more talking when they should be doing more listening.
Yeah.
Should be saying, all right, we're in a bubble. Academia is just in the tank right now, right? And so obviously we screwed up. So what is it that we screwed up about? What is it that we don't get? And I just don't see them making a lot of effort to to dig down into whatever that thing is. I have my beliefs about what it is. I have my suggestions about what it is. But like I said, I could be wrong, and I'm just one data point. I would like to see them finding a lot more data points. I keep pushing, every way I can from my little, space here. Yeah. But who am I, right? I'm not one of them. I'm not an academic. I have the credibility, and so I, just try to shout into the hurricane. And
think of it this way: your bookshelves are still bowing a little bit with all the acquired knowledge that you have there.
This is all. Everything here pertains to what I'm talking about.
Really?
I can't say that I've read every single one of them. I use it like a library. It's like when you're doing research.
Yeah.
And you go and look them up that way. I have read a lot of them, but not all of them. But yeah, it's like my own little library. I've had times here with in front of me on my just a little IKEA desk, right? But books open, like you see in a college library with someone doing a research paper with like 6 books different open, and so that's.
Well, I have 1,000 flies that I have to vacuum out of my windows, but I want, if you'd like to, do you know what set you down this path? I'd like to hear that story or that logical axiom.
I do know what set me down this path. And it is a story, and it's kind of in my Quillette article. When I graduated from college, I knew absolutely nothing about politics. I had my engineering degree, and that took up all my brain power. I was just not only not interested, disinterested in politics. But now I'm going out in the real world, and I'm going to start adulting and thinking I better be responsible about it, and I'm going to vote. I may as well. So because of my training in engineering and because of a couple of classes I took from the business school, I had been just sort of trained for years into looking for first principles, looking for that guide star that can help you make the little decisions day to day. Plus, I think I'm just sort of dispositional in that way. I think I just kind of, that's partly just, so that led me into all this reading of history books.
Okay.
It's the guide star. When my first job was here in DC, and so like anyone who just moves here, I go to the museums, and the first few weekends I'm walking around the museums. I'm in the National Archives. And there's a little gift shop, and there's one of those twirly wire cages with books on it, right? And there's a book, The Ideological Origins of the American Revolution, or the Declaration of Independence. Here it is. This is it. The first book from like 1983 that I bought, Declaration of Independence. And I read that, and to me, I was just fascinated. It's like, this is so cool. It was just an idea oriented. It was just it just got my mind going into first principles that helps me decide. And so that started me on the path of all these reading of history books. The other big one for me was this one, the American Revolution. That one was the Declaration of Independence. This one's the American Revolution. Those two are really it, and then several others.
Huh.
Yeah, that's what got it started. And then when, like I said earlier, when Haidt came along with his TED Talk and Moral Roots, and it's like, yes, that's it. That's what I've just been reading from history books. You're telling me from psychology. And so now I'm into reading all of these psychology. I don't know what it is. I just like it.
I need to ask you another question. What do you think conservatives should be aware of in order to be more attuned to what the liberals or the left has to add to society?
The same thing that I've been talking about. I think everybody, liberal and conservative equally, is generally clueless about why we humans do the silly things we do. Okay? we think we're based in reason, and we're really not, but we think we are. And so, and we think that the way we see things is reasonable and logical and only makes sense. So therefore, if someone else doesn't see it the way we do, they must be bad at reasoning, or maybe just not intellectual, or not academic, or dumb.
It goes from there, yeah.
It's funny you asked that question. I thought about it today. I thought, if there's value in liberalism, not if there's value, as if, but anyway, the value in liberalism is to advance the boundaries, right? To keep pushing that envelope. But as you alluded to, like when we first started talking, the blessing can also be the curse. And for liberalism is they don't know when to stop. There is no boundary. Whenever you reach the boundary, you just push it farther.
Yeah. All circumference and no center.
Okay, that sounds right. It's just always pushing the envelope, and once they get the envelope out to where they wanted it, they just make a new envelope. There's just no limiting principle to it. There's you're never done, and that can go too far. Mm-hmm. But you asked what the right should do. The right is, I think, in terms of understanding human nature, has a lot to learn too. And if, for example, if everyone, here's what I like to see: The Righteous Mind required reading in every freshman college year, so that people just understand that there is such a thing as a different way of seeing. That right there, that by itself, I think, would reduce the tension.
Yeah.
Right from the beginning. Yes, it's true that people use more knowledge to just make better arguments, and okay, so that might happen. But wouldn't it be great if we're arguing, oh, you're just doing your care harm foundation and you don't care about loyalty, right? And they might say, yes, exactly. Okay, now we're talking about something real that's based in knowledge, and not just saying you liberals are a bunch of bleeding hearts, right? There's a difference there. That's where I would like to see it get to.
Do you have another article coming out? You're writing this article now.
I'm writing an article now, and what I'm thinking is that I'll try to do it in a way that I think a magazine might publish it, but they might not. I've submitted other things, and they say this isn't for us. And if they don't, I'll just put it on my blog as a piece on there.
How many posts on your blog do you have at this point?
It's in the hundreds.
Okay, yeah.
Something, yeah.
Nice.
See, the blog is just it's just me. It's just I know you have to go, but Haidt asked me to review his book before it came out. Before it came out, he wanted a critique, and the instructions he gave me is, as you read it, when you feel a flash of effect, right, that he calls something that you really like or really dislike, tell me about it, and try to tell me why you think that way. Because sometimes I want to be doing that in the book. I'm doing it deliberately. But sometimes I want to avoid that, and I don't want to set people off so they don't see what I'm really saying. So just tell me what it is. And that's pretty much what I've been doing ever since.
Wow.
Is whenever somebody sees something or whatever that causes that sort of like, oh, I don't like that, or oh, I do like that, I try my best to figure out, okay, what is it about that I like or don't like, and why? And I try to get into, and just the simple fact of having to type it out for a blog in the way that somebody else might see forces me to do the best I can in my own limited way to make a coherent argument. And so it was just a way for me to organize my own thoughts. It was for me, just a vehicle for me to figure out what it is I do believe and don't believe. And so if anybody were so inclined, which I think is probably zero people, to read it from the beginning chronological, you'll see a development and I think a maturation of the ideas over time, but you'll also see some things that were there from the very beginning that are still there now. But that's all it is. It's just me venting. It's just me trying to articulate whatever this feeling is that I feel.
Well, you might be venting, but you're not railing.
Okay.
It doesn't seem like you're just like railing at the world.
Yeah.
It seems like you're actually trying to.
Sometimes I am. Like
put something together.
So an interesting thing happened with this tweet thread that caused you to call me. I mean, it caused you to call me and want to talk to me, and it caused somebody else to just call me a retard. Yeah. And so, and Twitter doesn't lend itself to a heck of a lot of nuanced explanations, and sometimes you just jump to the bottom line. And for example, one of those tweets that about the conference was that Heterodox Academy was tone deaf, right, and elitist and smug, right, and condescending, right. And so, I can get that way sometimes. Even in my blog pieces, as careful as I try to be, sometimes I am just sort of just saying, letting a little bit of the frustration out, So I wouldn't say every one of them is a nice, quaint, academic
intellectualization.
Right. So, sometimes it's just me saying, "Oh, I'm just so frustrated." But even Jordan Peterson does that, for Pete's sake. So I'm not in terrible company.
He does. No, you're not. He's made an art of that.
Yeah.
Actually,
just gets frustrated. He's you can see him in some of his videos. He's just Right. Sometimes you'll see that in some of my writing, but other times I'm trying to be reasonable. The articles that did get published are the more reasonable type.
Yeah.
The Quillette one and the Aereo, whatever they call themselves one. Those are the more academic, more intellectual ones. But yeah, so I don't claim to be a saint. I'm just being me. I'm just putting it out there. Whatever works.
Well, it's good stuff.
Doesn't.
It's good stuff. I want to appreciate you just enough.
Yeah.
So you're doing really good work.
That's good. So thank you. So I'm curious to see what this end product is that you put out with an interview with me. I'm curious to see, like, in the calm of the day or two from now, or whenever it comes out, to look at myself and be like, "Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed," or "I actually did okay." I'm curious to see how.
I think there was a organic flow, and it started to coalesce when we started to figure out what we were talking about and going back and forth a little bit more. So I should go now, though, Stephen.
All right.
You have a good night, and I'll ping you with the final version of this.
Okay.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Get those flies.
Yeah, right. Ugh. Talking about disgust. Have a good night.
All right, night.